class, we want to talk about due diligence in the third-party risk management lifecycle. Now, third-party due diligence occurs in both the onboarding and the ongoing. So when you see the diagram over here, you can see that during the onboarding stage, the second step is the due diligence. During the ongoing also, we have due diligence. What do we mean by due diligence? Now, due diligence means that you are taking the necessary steps to evaluate the vendor or the third party before you bring them on board. And so there are certain things that you do. Now, during the onboarding, we call it the IRQ or the inherent risk questionnaire. Now, during that stage, this is where we send in our inherent risk questionnaire. In my previous video, I talked about the inherent risk questionnaire, so you can go in, have a look where I explain these questionnaires. Now, these questions are being sent to the vendor to help to understand the risk level of that vendor. When you do that, you come and realize that in your quest to do your due diligence, you come and realize that you have actually gone ahead to be able to evaluate the vendor and understand the kind of engagement that our organization is trying to do with that vendor. And this is very, very important that we do that. Why is it important that vendor risk or due diligence is done? Now, this allows you to make an educated decision. It is also being required by our regulators. It also helps to identify gaps or weaknesses in the vendor's controls. And it helps us to be able to identify internal controls that we can implement to be able to mitigate some of the risks. And it's also set up the stage for the relationship. Remember, during the beginning of this stage, we are only talking to the business unit. We've not had a conversation with the vendor yet, and we'll have the conversation with the vendor very soon. Now, periodic risk reassessment and due diligence. Now, inherent risk should be reassessed during the ongoing stage of the third-party risk management cycle. Why? Because the inherent risk makes us understand the risk that is involved before any controls are put in place. So during the ongoing stage, that risk assessment again needs to be done. This makes us also have a better understanding of the security posture of the organization. Imagine that we are working with the vendor for 3 years. Now the vendor had a breach. We didn't do any risk assessment. How do we get to know that the vendor was actually breached? How was the vendor breached? What are some of the controls that the vendor doesn't have in place that got him to be breached? And so when we are doing inherent risks, it helps us to be able to understand all these things. Now, for reassessment, start by having your line of business or your business owners confirm with the vendor that nothing has changed in the relationship. Also, this can be done by reviewing and updating, if necessary, the inherent risk assessment that is actually being done. So you actually have a conversation with the business unit. The business unit talks to the vendor, find out from the vendor, has anything changed in the environment? If nothing has changed, can we go ahead and say that the controls that we have in place are still the same control that we have? If they say yes, okay, then we are good. If no, then now we have to go through the actual assessment all over again. Now, once you have validated that the inherent risk is the same, please reach back out to the vendor to be able to make sure that you are collecting updated documents, assessing the due diligence, and updating your residual risks accordingly. Why do we say this? Now, if the inherent risk is the same, meaning that it's still a very high or a high grade vendor, because of that, we need to be able to get updated documents. Maybe last year, the access control policy's password was 9 characters. This year, their password characters might be 12 or 15 characters. So we need to be able to update those records. If those records have been documented, we need a new copy of that. Now, almost every organization, control policies and procedures are updated on an annual basis. If it is updated, you need to be able to give us a copy of it so that we can keep those copies as evidences if we are being asked in an audit. A very good stand is to reassess critical and high-risk vendors at least annually. Moderate risk vendors every 18 months or 2 years. And for the low-risk vendors, you can go to 2 to 3 years. And so the normal standard is that every assessment needs to be at least high or critical vendors needs to be assessed on an annual basis. Then if it's moderate, 2 years. Then if it's a very low, then you can go on to be able to go to 3 years. I hope this makes sense to you. Now you understand why we do due diligence, both at the inherent risk stage and also during the reassessment stage. Thank you and catch you in the next class.